Hello and welcome back to Inside the Tank in the final week of the regular season. This is going to be one that nobody's going to forget, everyone's excited for, and maybe a little anxious for as well. So I always get kind of sad doing this because even though it's not the last one of the season, it's still the last one of the regular season. And this is the moment before the playoffs. So this is the last time that Inside the Tank during the regular season is going to happen before we go into playoffs mode. Now, there's a couple things that are going to happen this week in Steelheads news, and there's also a couple of things in OHL news. So we'll start off this episode by getting into the player of the week, which is none other than Kasper Larsson, who had 5 points in 4 games this past week with a goal and 4 assists, plus 3 blocked shots. Now, Kasper Larsson's one of those players that you always want to have on your team, and the reason being is because he's such an amazing shutdown defenseman. He's always getting in there, blocking shots, making good plays at the blue line, and making sure that the other team doesn't get that many shots on goal. So with that being said, Kasper Larsson absolutely deserved this player of the week, and he played outstanding through the last 4 games. So I think that he deserves this one. So I'm really looking forward to see where his career goes, because I do believe he's an overager either this season or... Yeah, I believe he's an overager this season. So he's eligible, I think, at the end of the year to sign with an NHL club, and I think that he absolutely will. There's no way that anybody passes up on him. He's a huge 6'6" frame. He's a defensive shutdown defenseman. There's an NHL team out there that's going to want him in the system, to say the very least. So Kasper Larsson, player of the week this week for Inside the Tank. Really, really happy for him. And this is going to be an incredible rest of the regular season to watch him play. Now, traditionally, we always do the recaps of the games that happened in the previous week. I'm only going to go after these past games. I'm not going to talk a lot about them because there is a lot to unpack in terms of the last 3 games in the regular season and the storylines that are coming with that. So, obviously, Friday night, Erie comes into town, and it's always a fun time when you're facing off against Erie because, obviously, that 2017 OHL Finals rivalry, it's always fun to watch Erie come back and play because there's something that not a lot of people, I say this myself because I always find it fun watching those games. It's something that not a lot of people realize, that the rivalry between these two teams is special. And why is it so special? It's because they always find a way to put on a great show. And this game was no exception. So the Otters go up 1-0 early because of Malcolm Spence. Xander Vecchia ties it, and then Kerry Terrence gets one back. So that was 3 goals, I believe, in the first 10, 15 minutes of the period. And that already proves my point. Because it's such an entertaining game, it's not always going to be high scoring, but there's a lot of really good scoring chances. There is a lot of huge saves, which we saw in that first period. If you watch the highlights back, you'll know what I'm talking about. But that 2-1 Erie lead set up the game for a huge moment. Now, you'll hear me mention the name Quinn Binney. He's been with the Steelheads for, I believe, 3 seasons now, the better part of 3 seasons. And up until this point, he has not been able to score his first OHL goal. But since he was back in the lineup this game, a perfect pass gets him the perfect opportunity. Quinn Binney scores his first OHL goal. And when we were interviewing him post-game, he was just so happy to finally have got it. I don't think I've ever seen anybody happier to score their first than him, because the smile on his face just really told the story. There is no bigger feeling other than breaking a record than scoring your first goal. And he 100% deserved that. He worked for it. He did it very well. And 100%, unquestionably, he's one of the hardest workers on this team. So congratulations, Quinn. That was a huge, huge moment for you. The game would end up being tied 3-3, and it would go to overtime. So this is where a lot of Steelheads fans were kind of biting their nails, because whenever you take a penalty in overtime, it usually ends up that the other team goes on the power play and scores the game winner. But that didn't happen. So Malcolm Spence draws a penalty. It's a penalty shot, Everybody's nervous in the building. They're on the edge of their seat, and I exaggerate not when I say this. I did not think the Steelheads were going to win this game. I thought that it was game over as soon as Malcolm Spence drew that penalty shot. Why did I think that? Because almost every single time that he gets within 2 feet of the net, he scores. So Malcolm Spence got the penalty shot. Bellieri comes up huge and makes a big save on that penalty shot, keeping the game alive. And then a couple minutes go by. The Otters come back the other way. Bellieri makes a huge save, passes it up to Adam Sedlitsky, and he rips it, absolute rocket, into the back of the net to win the game 4-3. And games like this, like I mentioned, especially against Erie, are always fun because it goes on in such a way that it's always entertaining. Because this game could have easily been very one-sided. Either the Steelheads won 7-0, and that's fun in its own, or the Otters ended up, blowing them out. That didn't happen. This was a very close game, and it was one that kept all of the fans on the edge of their seat, I think, for most of the game. So that was a really, really, really fun game. Now, the one that wasn't so fun was the game on Sunday, and it was a 6-3 loss in Oshawa. Carmieris, McDonnell, and Martone that got the goals. And this one was the first out of 2 meetings this week. So this one obviously in Oshawa on Sunday. Sunday night, mind you. It was an evening game. And this one they're coming back on Friday to face off against the Steelheads. So this is one that we're looking forward to. I know that it's always a fun time to face off against the Generals, especially because their social media team likes to have a little fun. So if you didn't see the tweet, or if you haven't seen their tweets after games that they win, it's quite humorous. But it's one of those moments that if you're facing off against Erie, Oshawa, like teams with a lot of history, it's always fun to watch those games. Especially Oshawa, when they come to town, they always kind of bring out the best in the Steelheads. And what I mean by this is they bring out the best in them in the sense that they play to their heart's content, right? They play the hardest that they can because they're going up against a team who, they obviously want to beat and they want to get higher up in the standings. And this is no exception. So Friday night, I believe Oshawa has the opportunity to clinch a playoff spot. Now, the Steelheads have already done that. Why is this such an important game? Because there's a couple different things that will happen should the Steelheads win. Number one, if the Generals lose, and I believe it's either, I can't remember who it was, but if the Generals lose and the team behind them wins, they're eliminated from playoff contention. But if the Steelheads lose, they're stuck in that 6th place spot. So my thinking is, I remembered that Kingston is right actually behind Oshawa. So if Kingston wins, Oshawa loses. I believe that they have to win out the rest of the season. They have to win out the last couple of games that they have left or else they're going to be eliminated. And see, the other thing is the Steelheads are only, I believe, 2 points ahead of Sudbury and 2 points behind Hamilton. So if Sudbury wins, Mississauga loses, they're going to take that 7th place spot, meaning they'll play North Bay in the first round. Not the ideal matchup. And if they win, they could potentially dethrone Hamilton and they will be taking on Peterborough. So obviously you would like to probably play Barrie because it seems like, the better matchup, the easier, I say in quotations, matchup, as opposed to Peterborough, who's got basically a super team. And their playoff stats are going to be pretty padded. So I would rather play Barrie personally because you can play them very well. We've proven that this season. But if it's against Peterborough, that would not be a bad matchup either. I think that could be a 6 or 7 game series because the way that these two teams play each other, Peterborough and Mississauga, not only is that a good rivalry, a good Eastern Conference rivalry, but it's one that I'm sure a lot of people would be looking forward to for obvious reasons. Owen Beck is coming back to play the Steelheads after being traded. So that's going to be one of the very exciting moments should they make the playoffs and face Peterborough. So that brings me to the upcoming game. So obviously I mentioned that Oshawa is playing in Mississauga on Friday. Last home game of the regular season against Peterborough on Saturday. And then they're in North Bay on Sunday to play out the final game of the regular season, where they will have a chance to finish in that higher seeded spot finally. Because as of this recording, the playoff matchups have not been finalized, have not been determined. So anything could happen in that time period. But I think if the Steelheads want to win this, winning on Friday and Saturday is your good chance to clinch that higher seeded spot. So let's move on to the storylines. There are a couple storylines in the last week of the regular season before the playoffs. So obviously I mentioned that Oshawa is in it and they're gunning for a playoff spot. The Eastern Conference playoff race, at least the bottom half, is very, very close. They're only a point ahead of Kingston, and they want to clinch that playoff spot. Now, they want to try and make one last hurrah, but the Steelheads can ruin that and kind of play spoiler, if you will, because they're already in the playoffs. Oshawa isn't. Oshawa's playing for their playoff lives. This is a very desperate Generals team that could probably do a lot of damage if you're not careful. So I would try and play them as hard as you can because you want to try and get those points and, you want to try and play spoiler, obviously. So Oshawa wants to make one last hurrah and clinch a playoff spot. The second game is against the Peterborough Petes. Like I mentioned, Owen Beck returning to Mississauga for the first time since being traded. That is one game that I'm looking forward to because obviously Owen is such a dynamic player and such I think, an effective player for Peterborough's roster. So him coming home, I think, is going to be one to watch because it's either going to go one of two ways. Either we're going to beat Peterborough and get into that second spot, or he's going to have a clinic and he's going to obviously score against us. And that's not something you would love to see, but it may happen. So that's going to be one to watch. Peterborough, Mississauga, Owen Beck's homecoming for the first time since being traded. North Bay, the game against North Bay. They're looking to retain that second place spot and play Sudbury. Obviously North Bay wants an easy matchup, and I think Sudbury, if worse comes to worse, I think that Sudbury would be the ideal matchup for them. And, it would probably be better for us if we're playing Barrie first round anyway. But North Bay still wants a certain matchup. And if, for some reason, the Steelheads end up playing the Battalion and Sudbury ends up winning and passing us in the standings, it is going to be a little bit difficult for them because, as we've seen, the times that we've played them this regular season, they haven't all been wins, but they've been tough games. And I think, personally, Mississauga can give them a run for their money. Do I think that they're going to sweep them in 4 games? Absolutely not. Do I think that they're going to win the series? Unsure, but it's possible. But that would be a matchup I think that the Battalion would rather not have as opposed to Sudbury. Sudbury's just a much, much easier team. And then finally, the last storyline of it all, like I mentioned, the battle for 4th place. Mississauga looks to beat Peterborough and Oshawa out and potentially beat Hamilton out and Peterborough for that 4th place spot and gain home ice advantage. How huge would this be if they got home ice advantage for that first round against Barrie? Because we've seen what happens when the Steelheads have home ice advantage. It happened in 2017 when they won the Central Division. It happened in 2021 last season where they had that home ice advantage and they were able to convert on that and they ended up making it past the first round in both series. So home ice advantage is a huge, crucial thing for them. And I think that if they want to gain that home ice advantage, they're going to have to play as hard as they possibly can. Now, with that being said, let me ask you a question. Who would you rather face in the first round, and what do you think the Steelheads are going to do this weekend? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll address it in the first episode of the playoffs. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell notification for all future content, and follow us on our socials down below. Thank you very much for watching. This has been your host, Tyler Rains, and I'll see you next time.